We'll break that down a little bit for those unfamiliar, talk about some of what's going on, and also I got the chance to speak today to executives from a few of the teams that were involved who acknowledged the letter and gave me some color about what was going on and how they plan to resolve it. But the big get here, the big fishes who are waiting on us to bring them in momentarily are AZK, Brax, and Skadoodle. If you are a longtime Counter-Strike fan, those names are not unfamiliar to you. The former players of iBuyPower, Skadoodle, a world champion with Cloud9, having won the 2018 E-League Boston Major. And they are now pro VALORANT players for the T1. So now 5 years after they were, after Brax and AZK, Dazed and Steel were banned as part of the iBuyPower match fixing scandal, AZK, Brax, and Skadoodle reunite now in VALORANT and will be one of the first professional completed VALORANT teams in T1, and probably the most high profile of all of them given those names. But first I want to sort of dig into a little bit of what's been going on with this conflict of interest stuff. If you're not familiar with Counter-Strike, this has kind of been an ongoing theme. Counter-Strike is an open system, and therefore, as a result, there's been a lot of people who have had multiple team ownership. They've been able to sort of finagle things here and there, and this has been a real big issue for a long time. If you remember several years ago, what is now Astralis Group, but at the time was Refresh, was a tournament organizer. They also owned Astralis. They also owned Heroic. They also owned Godsent. They were kind of had their hands in everything, and Valve sort of busted that up and wanted it to be split apart and said that tournament organizers couldn't also own teams, and also said that teams couldn't also own other teams, and that's how we got here today. So a few weeks ago, right before the Road to Rio qualifier, that is a regional major ranking event, all the teams were asked to fill out conflict of interest forms, and all of them did. And there were some immediate discrepancies at hand that came up while they were filling out those forms. Specifically, there is a team called Yeah Gaming, which is a Brazilian team that qualified for this Road to Rio event, who is owned and co-founded by some of the people that are involved in MIBR and the core that used to be Luminosity Gaming, SK Gaming, and MIBR before some of those pieces split up. So the players that were called out by Valve that need to sort of resolve these conflicts are Taco, Cold Zera are the players, Dead, who is the manager of MIBR, and Zeus, who is the coach of Evil Geniuses. So the teams that got the letter this past week were Immortals Gaming Club, which is the parent of MIBR, Yeah Gaming, FaZe Clan, Evil Geniuses, Dignitas, Ninjas in Pajamas, and INTS. So essentially, Taco, Dead, Cold Zera, and Zeus all own parts of Yeah Gaming. That was the big deal that happened during the qualifier. If you remember a few weeks before the qualifier, there was a lot of talk about Yeah participating in this. Would something happen? Nothing did happen. I don't think Valve is alleging any unfair play here, but what they are saying is that these need to be resolved before November when the actual major rolls around. There were a couple other conflicts of interest that they identified, one of them being that Lurpus, the former analyst and writer who is now an executive at Immortals Gaming Club, is also a co-founder and part owner of INTS. And then also Get Right, the prolific Counter-Strike player, now a player for Dignitas, still has a minor stake in Ninjas in Pajamas. So all these teams got a letter from Valve, which we, HLTV, originally reported, and we confirmed that essentially they needed to fix this up into November. So today I reached out to all of the teams to try to talk to them about this, and a few of them did get back to me. I wanted to read, first of all, some comments we got from Ari Segal, who is the CEO of Immortals. He runs Immortals Gaming Club, obviously, who own MIBR, own Immortals, own Optic Gaming, own the Los Angeles Valiant. And so essentially here is what he said to me. At the beginning of the year, we entered into a services agreement with Yeah, and were subsequently made aware of certain MIBR members' ownership interest in that company. We disclosed the service agreements and encouraged Yeah to disclose its ownership conflicts to Valve. Following disclosure to Valve, both the service agreements and ownership issues were made public and had been widely known in the CS community for several months. Now that Valve has informed us of its official stance, we will of course take the necessary measures to ensure compliance. We encourage our players to think of themselves not just as players, but as business people too. They will have professional lives after their playing careers, and we try to be supportive of our players engaging in activities that will benefit them economically, professionally, or both over the long term. Still, it goes without saying that all activity, ours and theirs, has to conform to and align with relevant rules and standards, and we will actively work with our players to get to the right place. So that's what Ari had to say, and essentially no one in me talking to them today deny this in any sort of way. The other part of this is that I got a comment also from Hacham Shaheen, who is the CEO of Ninjas in Pajamas, who said, since Christopher Get-Right was transferred to Dignitas in December last year, we had an ongoing conversation about his ownership in NIP and conflict of interest it can have should we participate in the same tournaments. They've been planning a resolution for some time, which will be completed this summer. Even though the stake is non-controlling of a passive nature, it is important to the integrity we resolve this is in due course. And then finally, also on Get-Right, I got a comment from Heather Garazzo, the vice president of Dignitas, who said Get-Right informed Dignitas that he is a shareholder in Ninjas in Pajamas and that since joining Dignitas, he's been actively working to transfer those shares. Dignitas and Get-Right are confident this will be resolved before the next major. And then finally, I spoke to the CGO of Evil Geniuses, Philip Aram, who said Wilton Zeus was clear about his work with YA when he joined Evil Geniuses, and we supported his desire to keep building opportunity for Brazilians through Counter-Strike. It's disappointing that Valve has deemed his and other stakes in YA as a major conflict. Wilton and the others have reached out to Valve to discuss ways to mitigate that don't involve stripping the team of the community leaders who have given it life. So this is unsurprising. As I mentioned earlier, Counter-Strike being what it is, being an open circuit, allowing for people to develop. And I don't think all of this is poorly intentioned either, by the way. I think it's particularly if you look at the YA situation, there's a history of a lot of these Brazilian players, Fallen and Taco and Coldzera and others. They want to get back, right? They are the quintessential story of being able to make it out of their country, using Counter-Strike as a vehicle to do so. They're immensely financially successful individuals, and now they want to give back to people who, like them, 6-7 years ago, were in Brazil and unable to compete elsewhere. We saw this previously with how they gave back to what became Tempo Storm and then Immortals with the roster of Hen1 and Lucas1, and how they brought them to America to be able to compete after running a tournament. And overall, this has been a sort of a giving for them. So I don't think that this is in any way necessarily nefarious. I think the same thing with the Ents and the Ninjas in Pajamas situations as well with Lurpus and Get-Right. You know, Get-Right's been with NIP for a long time. I'm sure that ownership share was initially promised or issued very early in his career when Counter-Strike players weren't being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. The income was not very low. And I'm sure, or the income was very low. And I'm sure to incentivize him to stick around, there was probably ownership issued. How they'll resolve that, it's a little bit difficult, particularly right now in the middle of a pandemic where finances are a little dry for a lot of people. But I'm sure they'll get it fixed. And finally, with Ents, Lurpus is someone who's been around the scene for a long time, former player of Evil Geniuses. He co-founded that team. He's a smart guy. That's how he ended up at the Immortals Gaming Club executive position. Again, I don't think particularly nefarious, but this is sort of the pattern that Valve has been taking, and I found it notable that this was happening. So enough with that, though. Let's get to the moment you're all here for. We are going to be welcoming AZK, Brax, and Skadoodle onto the show. We do have to go to a quick break to be able to get them all set up, but they are waiting for us. So when we come back, we will be joined by AZK, Brax, and Skadoodle. Welcome back to the Eco. I am Jacob Wolf, your host, and I'm joined by three lovely gentlemen here. One of them who is a Counter-Strike World Champion turned Valorant Pro and now apparently going into IT professional after we work through our tech issues over here with Skadoodle. Mr. Skadoodle, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Doing all right. I'm glad we figured that out. And we're also joined by Brax and AZK, his teammates on T1. Boys, how are you guys?
Doing well.
Doing good.
So if you are unfamiliar with these guys, I'm surprised you're watching a Counter-Strike show, but welcome. Every single one of these guys is incredibly accomplished in CS in their past, and reunited at last in Valorant now that two of you are now able to play professionally at the highest level. So I do want to sort of talk about that. I guess, you know, given the context, how close you guys were and how well you were doing on iBuyPower before the bans, how does it feel to sort of be back together and playing under the same banner again?
Yeah, I think it feels amazing actually to be reunited. Obviously these two guys were like some of my favorite teammates on iBuyPower, so it feels really nice to get a chance to play at a high level again with them. So I'm super excited for the future.
Yeah. Who would have thought that we'd all be united once again? Pretty crazy timeline, I'd say, for sure. Sounds like Valorant came around at the perfect time, honestly.
Yeah, and in that regard, I'm sort of curious. Brax and AZK, you guys have had to sit out at least a lot of professional CS over the past 5 years. Unable to play in Valve designated tournaments like the majors, and you've seen Ska been able to sort of go on and win a world championship and a major and have all the success. And I guess what I want to ask is like, I'm sure you're happy for him as someone who is your friend, but in terms of wanting to be there with him and sort of the ascendancy you guys were on iBuyPower, I guess, was there any sort of like, you guys wish you were there with him?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of times, I think I watched like all of his matches, and yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of times where I would have liked to be there, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would have been nice, but obviously we're super happy for him and everything he's accomplished. So felt nice watching it, even if it was from the sidelines.
Yeah.
Moving on from CS and now playing Valorant, particularly for you, Scott, but for all of you, because you had such a name there, both as streamers and being able to compete in non-Valve tournaments also for the two of the other of you. For you guys, like, is it sort of sad to leave behind a game that you committed so much of your life to?
For sure. Yeah. I feel pretty strongly about it. I mean, I've played professional CS for like 6 years, and I still believe Counter-Strike is the greatest, FPS, at least in my life, for sure. Growing up, I played a lot of Counter-Strike, and I definitely owe Counter-Strike, complete respect. Like it kind of molded me who I am today, the FPS player that I am today, made me a very competitive person. And, it's definitely saddening, but I'm always looking forward to new projects, looking forward to the future. So it's sad to say goodbye, but honestly, I'm really glad that I got into this whole FPS thing, and I really owe Counter-Strike a lot to that. So
For the other two of you guys, leaving it
Yeah,
behind?
I'm gonna have to agree with Tyler. I played CS pretty much my whole life. It was definitely a big part of my life. But considering everything that happened, I think it's good that we're moving on to something bigger. I'm not gonna say better, but like just it works out, given our situation. But yeah, I think it's bittersweet.
Yeah, and for me, I've been playing CS since 2004, and obviously after everything, it feels nice to have something new to look forward to. And I'm not even thinking about CS for a second anymore. It's all behind me now.
Before the bans, before the iBuyPower bans, your team was sort of the rising stars, right? Like you were going to be the best North American Counter-Strike team, and it looked like North America was sort of eventually where it ended up with Liquid and Cloud9, sort of on the coattails of Europe, and at times sort of being better on the day and winning tournaments, as Skadoodle you did with Cloud9. What do you think the ceiling was for that team that you guys were on? Had the ban hammer not come down from Valve?
honestly, who knows at this point? Honestly, I still consider us like we could have definitely went farther for sure. We had a lot of potential. Counter Strike at the time was getting pretty spicy. Some good teams, some orgs were jumping into CS, and we were excited about the future. And we just had a really good time competing together. Our success really brought us together and made us better competitors overall. And honestly, like, who would have known what would have happened? Honestly, I think our potential was, past the sky. Honestly, we were an insane team. We got along really well together. We were very competitive. We didn't like losing whatsoever, and we were willing to fix whatever problems that we had in order for us to succeed.
I think we all pushed ourselves to be like better teammates and just be the best we could be. I think it was really good. We all had similar goals and stuff.
Hmm.
We just all wanted to be the best, and we did whatever it took to make that happen. Whether it was like playing 12 hours a day or doing in-houses for multiple hours, just working on seeing what we could improve. So I think it was really good.
Yeah, I think the skill ceiling of that team was endless, to be honest. Like, probably the best team I've ever been on, and honestly, we were just getting started, and the best was yet to come.
AZK, you moved on to Overwatch for a brief period of time, and you told me a week and a half ago that you were like kind of feeling from Brax and from others sort of being pulled back into Counter-Strike just because you miss playing with your friends and the people that you were closest to at the time. So in terms of making that decision and sort of coming back, I mean, why didn't you look to move to something else? Maybe not even Overwatch, if it felt a little bit stale for you.
You're saying like after? Like when
Yeah,
I got
like
back?
if you looked at moving to something else besides Overwatch or CS, look to move into another game that was at the time.
No, I mean for me it was either stay in Overwatch or go back to CS. There was no other options.
Got it. And Brax, for you stuck it out and obviously subbed in for Cloud9 at various different points, played on teams of your own in CS outside of the major circuit. For you, did you ever consider trying to find something else in the interim between being banned and now becoming a Valorant pro?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely considered other games and stuff, but I don't know, CS was just like, it's just like the game I loved and like grew up playing, so I put a lot of hours into it and I just didn't really want it to go to waste. And, I knew I could play at the top level if I had the chance, but it was just hard with the ban and everything. But yeah, I tried to make it work for sure.
You guys are older, a lot older than you were in 2014 and 2015, the last time you all were playing with one another. How have all of you changed? And if you noticed now being able to practice together over the past week and a half or so since Scott joined the team, have you noticed, or I guess what sort of changes have you noticed within one another in terms of being, in terms of being people and individuals different from 5 years ago?
Anyone want to start?
I mean, I don't feel like much has changed. I feel like we're all like pretty similar still in our ways. We still joke around and shit and have fun, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't feel like much has changed. I feel like we're all a bit more mature, but we're also pretty mature back then too, for the most part. And yeah, I don't feel like too much has changed, honestly.
I would say for myself that I got a lot of experience playing under some fantastic teams. Got to play with a lot of experienced players, and I've gathered so much that I can now relay to others and my current teammates as well, which is really going to play a hand in the current Valorant right now, especially since it's brand new. I feel like talking about the basics and getting everything down team-wise, like communication and basic things like that, not even within the game, but just for our own team's sake, it's going to be really important. And it just feels good to give a lot of knowledge if I can offer any to some new players that haven't like experienced like really big events or haven't really made it to the main stage and played for a big tournament. Feels good that I can really help them with anything they like have questions or like experience. I can talk through it with them. I can let them know what to expect and just trying to. I also like to give team like a very calm experience as well. I know things can get very hectic, especially in Valorant, given all the abilities, and I really hope to give this like calming experience to the team and make sure everything's okay. They shot an RPG this way, like it's gonna be okay. We're gonna be just fine. So hopefully it goes well. Hopefully that all the experience that I've got from CS:GO hopefully can way over to Valorant and just help us succeed with our future endeavors. So
when you left professional Counter-Strike, you talked a little bit about burnout and sort of being, it felt like you had accomplished a lot, which you had, and then also sort of, it being a grind that was really mentally taxing. What has the break been like for you from now being another professional player in a different scene and that time of being a streamer and sort of taking some time to yourself after such a grind of professional Counter-Strike for a number of years?
Well, working up to the major was like climbing a hill for me. And once I finally got to the peak, I really needed a break, like really bad. I dropped out of groups like countless amount of times. And once I finally got that big trophy under my belt, I just felt it was like necessary to really take a break. I've been working so hard all these past years to land the title for North America. And, once I finally got it, I thought it'd be a good time to really step back and just, reevaluate like what I want to do in the future. Do I want to keep competing? Do I want to take a little break for a short while? So, I turned to streaming, which honestly works out for me because I consider myself a pretty big gamer. I'm willing to play pretty much anything if it's fun, right? I'm not like one of those hardcore Counter-Strike players who just play Counter-Strike endless, who only played Counter-Strike. I was always the gamer who just kind of played whatever was meta at the time, or whatever people were playing. Like when PUBG came out, I had played a lot of PUBG, and I just play a lot of different games. So streaming has been really fun, honestly. It's just I don't know if I'm ready to just sit back and watch people compete. I still feel like I have a lot of left in me, and I'm willing to. Valorant has given me a great opportunity to really hop in, especially with my former teammates, Kevin Brax, and it's just a really good opportunity that's really came to my attention recently. And of course, competing has always been like on the fence for me because I've always thought I could get back in, but now that Valorant came out and playing for T1, of course, we're a very respectable org. Our visions align. They want to win, I want to win, so it all worked out.
So let's
Like
win.
there for a while, Ska, you were a very sought after free agent in Valorant. I heard your name thrown around a lot of different places, but why T1? Why did you sort of settle where you ended up?
Well, I had speaking with the CEO Joe Marsh, and he just we connected really well. I don't mind doing content creation. I enjoy I like making people like laugh. People enjoy my content, but like he made it pretty clear that he wants to win, and I definitely want to win as well. And I feel like it's just a great match. I have Kevin Brax here, a very respectable coach. We have food and Crashies as well, very great fraggers. Funny story, I had actually handpicked Crashies to be on my rank S team for it's a CS event that happened a while back. I had actually handpicked him to be on my team, and we did actually win that event. Funny story. So I get to play with him, and it's just a great opportunity. I've been on the fence for a while, but T1 definitely they're aligned with my vision. And I'm happy to be here for sure.
For all three of you, does it feel like you now have to, or I guess, do you feel like you have to make up for some lost time being back together again, not being able to play at the highest level of CS together as a three, and now you're back in a game that has no restrictions for you guys, and you're able to sort of do what you want and compete as you want. Does it feel like you're making up for a little bit of lost time?
For me, I mean, I still was playing at maybe not the highest level in CS, but like I was up there for the most part. Like I was in Pro League for a little bit, MDL, and I was like grinding every day with my team. So I feel like I still have like most of the mechanics and stuff down. I think the biggest thing for me is like just the abilities in Valorant and just finding out ways to incorporate the abilities to team play and just trying to get the best use out of them.
I think you're muted, AZK.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so
There
I was saying, so for myself, even when I wasn't competing, I was still actively gaming, even if it was like death matching CSGO. I was always like trying to stay sharp, aim-wise, movement-wise, and all that. I was always playing games like Quake on the side, trying to get my reflexes up and all that. So personally, like I don't feel like I have to make that much for lost time and all that.
More so from a competitive perspective, though, you think about what you could have achieved together in Counter-Strike if circumstances were different. Do you feel like in that respect, though, like does that motivate you to in Valorant to sort of like go get what you weren't able to get together in CS?
Oh yeah, definitely, without a doubt. Yeah.
And now you guys are paired with Food and Crashies, both former CS guys also, and a little bit younger, somewhat akin to what Brax, you were in the iBuyPower team, the young guy that was sort of up and coming. That's what they are. And now you guys are sort of the older veterans now in the scene and have been around and have experience under your belt, respectively. From a mentorship perspective, I mean, I guess what lessons did you learn from CS, from team play and sort of environment and everything else you think you can get back to those guys and sort of teach and mentor?
I feel mentality is a big one. I feel like playing Counter-Strike was a very big mental game, and even though the scoreboard might look bad, you might be down like 10 rounds, like there's always a chance to come back as long as you stay in the game and as long as you're level-headed, making good decisions. And you can always play good Counter-Strike and win. That's what made the game so so fun to play. Even if you were so far down the scoreboard, as long as you guys, stay level-headed, kept playing strong, made good decisions, not losing your cool, good communication. I mean, it goes on and on. There's always an opportunity to come back, and I feel like it's very strong that we come across as like, being mentally strong as a team, and whatever happens. That was all last round. We'll talk about it later. We just keep moving on forward, and we just keep looking for the rounds ahead, and just keep our heads in the game.
In terms of Valorant similarities to Counter-Strike, are there anything, I mean, obviously the gunplay is very Counter-Strike inspired in many different ways. Some of the maps are also, I think a lot of people have compared Ascent to things like Dust 2 and Mirage over the past couple of days since it came out. So there are obvious similarities, but for you guys, I mean, we see a lot of these Counter-Strike players, your buddy Hiko obviously just made this transition, and there are countless others that are lesser known, making the jump from one to the other, from Counter-Strike to Valorant. Do you think that generally the top most successful players will be Counter-Strike players straight out the gate?
I think so at first, yeah.
I think they have a slight edge, but for the most part, I think it's whoever's going to grind the game. I think at the end of the day, it's all about work ethic. So if you grind the game and just work really hard, I think you'll be on top for the most part. But I do think CS players, with the mechanics and everything, I think they do have a slight edge over people from other games.
Yeah, I agree. I think off the break, like Counter-Strike players are definitely gonna have an easier time playing Valorant, but it's really all about work ethic, especially so early on. Like, I played Counter-Strike, but I wasn't anywhere near pro level. And then when I was given an opportunity to really succeed, I took it all the way home. I tried to work as hard as I could. I scrimmed as much as I could. And I just found my way to the top. I keep on working hard, and never looking back. And it's really going to be about work ethic here. But definitely Counter-Strike players will have an easier time, but I guarantee you that there's going to be some insane young talent out there. And, I look forward to the future. There's going to be some insane players for sure.
A lot of the players who are making this jump, if you look at Hazed and Cutler and Mixwell and Scream, those types of players, obviously their Counter-Strike careers were sort of at the tail end of things, right? Like they had sort of reached if you look at their entire careers as like a mountain, there at the bottom of the mountain on the other side, and sort of reached their respective peak. You guys at Brax and AZK are obviously having unique circumstances around a ban, and Skadoodle, you had taken time off. But do you think that, I guess what I want to ask, what do you think it would take for a top CS player to make that transition, or if at all, given that Counter-Strike is fairly stable, compensation's well? Do you think any like actively top player in CS right now would make the jump to Valorant, or you think there's no reason to?
For now, I don't know. I'm a little skeptic about jumping over so early. I'm a pretty logical guy. Like, I want to see how the game kind of plays out. And I feel like, Counter-Strike's at a great place. It's thriving. It's always been a fantastic game to watch. And, the numbers are showing it's still a very popular game. It's fun. And, I don't really see a reason to jump over so early. I mean, if they're not in a good place and they want to switch it up, of course, Valorant, open arms for sure. But as for the beginning, I don't know. I would like to see where Valorant really takes off, and I want the game to really build its infrastructure, and I want to see where this game really wants to go before making a serious commitment like that.
Your friend, he's former teammate to some of you, Shroud, actually said that he's made a lot of comments about Valorant recently, so I want to ask this. The first was that the game wasn't ready for release before it actually came out, and more recently, in the past couple of days, he has said that he doesn't think the ceiling is as high as Counter-Strike, and he doesn't think the level that Valorant can reach as an esport professionally is as high as Counter-Strike either. And I think by most accounts, most people would consider Counter-Strike the second biggest game in the world as an esport, right behind League of Legends. So do you guys agree with that? I mean, what is your opinion? Where does Valorant stand both in skill and in, I guess, business potential relative to CS?
Kev, Brax?
I mean, I would have to agree for now, probably. I think like the CS scene's the esport as a whole is like pretty set, and I think it's really well right now, the way it's going. A lot of people watch Counter-Strike at the high level, and it's really entertaining. I think we're gonna need a lot more time to see like what happens with Valorant and like the competitive scene as a whole. So
Yeah, I mean,
but
I
yeah,
understand some of the comments that he's saying, but on the other side of the coin, like if you're making the game easier, it's also easier for the other guy on the other end too. So I feel like it kind of evens out. I agree with a little bit with what he's saying in terms of like the skill gap. You know, it could be a little bit lower, but I do think that it's a good thing that the game is more accessible to everyone, and you know, having both like being able to use an AK and an M4 on both sides, I think it, you know, it kind of like evens some of these things out. So, yeah, little things like that.
Yeah, I mean, Counter Strike is definitely very hard to master for sure. You got to learn the mechanics. You got to make sure you know your bullets are going straight and learning how to the recoil patterns. And I feel like Valorant definitely has an easier hand in terms of like you know shooting mechanics and you know playing the game in general. Um, but I mean, Counter Strike once you reach the top level, you know it can be very simple. And but that's honestly some of the hardest things about Counter Strike is the fact that you know once you learn everything about the game, it just never stops evolving. Like you can do a lot of things, even though you know it's coming. You can still work around it and teamwork, you know, over everything. And then in Valorant, it's just there are a couple agents that you know anyone can really play and get a kill with, which you know isn't really this. It's not the same at all. Like in Counter Strike, you know, everyone's on an even level, and you know you could be separated by a simple flash or a nade, smoke, molly. But in this game, you know, when you're playing a certain agent, you're separated entirely by you know whoever you're playing. Like if you're playing a Sova, you know that's this he's capable of getting free info. His ultimate, you know, goes through the entire map. Like I just feel like you know Counter Strike definitely is tougher to play for sure, and it's just a little. It's kind of like Valorant. There's just a lot to it, honestly, and it's just a little. It's not as simple as you would think it is. There's all the agents are very unique. They all have different abilities and roles, and I don't know. You know,
I'll end on this. Do you think there's a world that any of you ever go back to Counter Strike, or you think that door is shut?
I'm definitely
I'm-
not interested in going back personally, no matter what.
yeah, I'm pretty happy with Valorant right now. For sure.
I'm down to go back. Let's get 2 major titles. Let's go. I'm down to go back.
All right, well, gents, thank you so much for joining me. If you have missed it, you can watch this VOD later. But Skadoodle, Brax, AZK, thank you very, very much. We appreciate you all taking the time, and best of luck in Valorant.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we will be right back momentarily to talk a little bit more about the letter that Valve issued. Thanks to those guys for joining us. Stick right with us. We'll be right back to end the show. Thank you again to Skadoodle, Brax, and AZK for joining us. We wish them very, very well in Valorant, and I'm sure the Counter-Strike Global Offensive scene will miss them very much. Circling back to what we talked to at the beginning of the show, if you lived under a rock today in the Counter-Strike scene, there was a letter that Valve sent out to 7 different organizations in Counter-Strike who notifying them that they needed to resolve conflicts of interest. These organizations are MIBR, Yeah Gaming, FaZe Clan, Evil Geniuses, Dignitas, Ninjas Pajamas, and INTS. If you're unfamiliar, a lot of the original MIBR core were involved with Yeah Gaming, which is a Brazilian organization that essentially is bringing up and coming talent out of Brazil, similar to how those guys did that with, and Fallen did that with the guys that went on to become Tempo Storm and Immortals, Lucas and Hin1's roster. Again, I don't think any of this is nefarious, but I would say I don't understand why it's happening now. I think one thing that Valve could do moving forward better is probably policing a lot of this more regularly. We've talked about this a lot. I wrote a column a few weeks ago about Valve needing to get more involved in CS because Valorant and how Riot is involved in Valorant in a way, and there's going to be obvious competition between the two. I think because of the players that are going from one to the other, like the 3 guys who are on this show, as well as the countless other Counter-Strike pros who are making that transition, there will be plenty of Counter-Strike fans who become Valorant fans. And I think that Riot is going to push really hard in their game, as they have with League of Legends in the past few years, from a first-party perspective, and that Valve should do the same. You know, conflicts of interest aren't new to Counter-Strike. We've seen them happen before, like I mentioned earlier in the show, with Refresh is probably biggest among those. If you look at the fact that they were a tournament organizer who also owned Astralis, they also owned Heroic, they also owned Godsent. They obviously do not anymore, and Valve sort of busted that apart. But the fact that, you know, this happened and only was found out because of conflict of interest forms that were submitted right before the Road to Rio event a few weeks ago in May, it's just a little confusing. I think that Valve certainly right now, with sort of the scene in a very odd position given the pandemic and events being canceled and moved left and right, there's a lot of uncertainty. Counter-Strike is still really stable as an esport, but we've heard a lot, whether that be from Dan Fiden, who's been on this show, the president of Cloud9 and one of the founders of Flashpoint, talking about salary issues, and we've had other people from ESL talking about some of that as well, and how everyone is trying to figure out how they make revenues. I just hope that Valve gets more involved and sort of helps push that along, because this is a great opportunity. We don't know what's going to happen. There's sort of no blueprint for how you handle esports in a global pandemic. We've seen sports have to innovate too in that way with, you know, obviously the NBA just announced that they're coming back with a limited team format. They're going to all play in one place. You kind of just have to, you know, work through it as you go. There's no like one instance that you can point to of precedent. So I do think all of that to say that this is the right time for Valve to get involved more than they already have. We know that they have a watchful eye and they pay attention because they react to things like this. They react to things like the Major. They make things like the RMR. They're trying. So I definitely want to acknowledge that there's an effort there. I won't say that they're completely absentee like Nintendo or some other companies that don't manage their esport really at all, other than giving game licenses. But I just hope that they take this opportunity and things like this to really talk about it and be a little bit more transparent in talking behind the curtain. I think that that's one thing that a lot of Counter-Strike fans, Counter-Strike media members like myself and others have really wanted out of them. And instead, we've sort of gotten these sort of vague things. I don't know why this, particularly this conflict of interest thing, I don't know why this wasn't announced publicly. HLTV found out via a letter. I confirmed that that letter was sent to who it was sent to. I don't understand why there wasn't a blog post, which we normally have gotten in these types of situations, whether that be them sort of not wanting franchise leagues or everything else and people threatening to take away game licenses. You know, Counter-Strike has such a big opportunity, as does Dota, which is another game they manage. They are, respectively, Dota and Counter-Strike, I think, the second and third biggest esports in the world, and they deserve more love and attention from the people who make them on the esports side of things. Because at the end of the day, one thing that's super important is that while an esports game like League of Legends or Counter-Strike or a Dota, while those games may not be as big as Fortnite in the pop culture lexicon, the reason that those games have had so much success over their long tenure, Counter-Strike for almost 20 years now at this point, right? We're approaching that little peak here in a year with the overall game. And League of Legends for a decade at this point as well. And Dota is going to be coming up, I believe, on 8 this year. This will be the International 10 too. If you look at these games, the reason they have been able to stay so successful is because people are constantly engaged. And esports is such a big part of that. that I think that it's important for Valve to really, really get involved. And I think that I'm not the only one that feels this way. A lot of the other executives and people I've talked to in Counter-Strike wish that they were more involved right now. Because again, we are in unprecedented times in COVID-19. I'm sure you've heard that a billion other places. But particularly as it pertains to esports, we are too. So that's my hope. I wish that we would have all found out about this via a blog post or a statement or a press release and not through media members like myself having to go confirm it elsewhere. I'm glad me and HLTV and others exist to be able to do that work. But nonetheless, I don't think it necessarily should be that way. So that's it for us. We're going to close out this show. Thank you again to Brax, AZK, and Skadoodle for taking the time out of their day to come spend it with us. We will be back next week. We're planning a lot of other stuff. We will have more announcements on my Twitter, which is @JacobWolf, and the ESPN Esports Twitter, which is ESPN_Esports. You give us a follow on this channel. We do have content all the time. Tomorrow we are going to have Riff Rewind, which is our League of Legends show. Wednesday we have Search and Destroy, which is a Call of Duty show. Thursday we have a Valorant show also, and Friday we have League of Emily Rand's LPL Corner and League of Legends Trivia on Friday night. Programming all throughout the week here on ESPN Esports. If you are a fan of multiple esports titles, please come spend the week with us. We appreciate having you here. You can find this VOD if you tuned in a little bit throughout the show and not through the full part of it at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. It will be there momentarily. You can find our other content there. We're covering a lot of VALORANT. We're covering a lot of Counter-Strike, everything on that channel. But thank you so much again for joining us tonight, and we will see you next week.